I'm Sonya Morton Firth and you're tuned in to the Sonya Morton Firth Show. Today my guest is Dean Stott. Dean is a Special Forces veteran, world record holder, adventurer, philanthropist, author and speaker. After leaving the military following a parachute accident, he went into the private security sector. And during one of his missions, he single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy. Watch this interview to gain an insight into the mindset behind the unrelenting pursuit of excellence.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for being on my show today. And I was just saying it would be lovely to have it live, but you're up, all the way up in Aberdeen. So it might have taken us quite a long time to get together.
Yeah, a long time probably, yeah. But no, thank you for having me on the show, yeah.
Dean, you've done an incredible amount of extraordinary things in your life. But what I want to sort of ask you first is about your tagline, the unrelenting pursuit of excellence, and what that really means to you and how you got that line.
So I got the line. The line is actually one of the ethoses of the UK Special Forces. You know, we have humility, we have courage, integrity, and the unrelenting pursuit of excellence is also one of them. And for me, I think it's a great ethos because it's not just in military or in sport. It can be anything that you do, your everyday approach, that if you're going to do something, you do it to the best of your ability. So for me, when I start a new project, I don't like to, for example, the cycling. I wasn't comfortable in just going and joining a cycling club. I had to find the longest road in the world and try and beat the world record. So I'm always pushing the boundaries. But the great thing about that ethos as well is, and people to be aware of, is not to compare themselves to others. It's your unrelenting pursuit of excellence. As long as you've given your 100%, and you'll sleep well at night.
Do you think so? I mean, you served for 16 years in the Special Forces. Do you think or how did that experience sort of shape who you are today?
Yeah, so sort of going back to the earlier story, my father was in the military, my grandparents were in the military, so I was very much immersed in that environment. So I lived and breathed the military lifestyle. I actually didn't want to join the military myself. I wanted to be a fireman. But then when I approached my father and told him my intentions, you know, he gave me them warm, comforting words I'd last 2 minutes. Which wasn't the response I was expecting, but at 9.5 stone and 5'7", I could probably see where he was coming from. But hindsight is a great thing. It may have been reverse psychology. And so I didn't have any aspirations of being a soldier, especially Special Forces. I didn't know much about the military. So when I did join the military, my father then took me aside and sort of explained in detail the elements of it. But he was a football manager and coach for the army. So for the army team, so his military career was very much, we call them tracksuit soldiers. That's your discipline. And this was long before Afghanistan and the likes of Iraq and things like that. So there was the time and manpower to do that. But I soon realized I joined the military, and then I ended up going to Germany, playing for the engineer team over there. And I was just like, you know, I want to carve my own path. And I joined the commando course, but within a short period of 4 years, from the age of 17 to 21, I was a para-commando, a diver and PTI. So every time I was doing courses, I was getting more confident in my abilities, and I was starting to believe in myself. And it was almost, well, what next and what next? It wasn't something I'd always wanted to do as a child. There's a lot of guys that all they've ever wanted to be as a young boy is a Marine or a para or in the SAS and SBS. I didn't put myself under that pressure. But as I started evolving as a soldier, I thought, well, what's next? And so, yeah, I sort of fell into it by accident. I never even heard of the Royal Marines or the SBS when I joined the military.
And how difficult or what challenges did you have whilst you were going through that period of your life?
I think obviously there's the natural physical challenges as well, especially at a young age. You know, at 17, you've not fully developed as a man yet. I remember going back. I did my commando course at 19. I remember going back 3 years later as an instructor and finding it so much easier. So it's, you know, the people join the military at different stages in their lives. I think those that start young have always got that fire in their belly, and those that start a bit older and a bit more wiser but more developed. So there was the physical issues as well. But for me, I saw almost my family anyway, we're not a close-knit family. We don't have an extended family anyway. It was just my dad and my sisters. My parents split up. So for me, it was almost like I found a new family. I felt I had a purpose. So I really sort of, you know, took advantage of that situation. And it wasn't long before, you know, I was only going to do 3 years, and next thing it's 6 and 9. And I mean, you're ended up being a career soldier. So it wasn't something I'd sort of planned on doing. I just sort of fell into it by accident, and naturally did well in the environment. Enjoyed being around the guys as well. I just felt like I was part of a unit, part of a family, or, you know, part of a team.
I just want to pick up on something you said. You said you felt like you had a purpose. Yeah. What was it like, or how did you feel when you left the military, and sort of having to fit back into civilian life or fit back into society? Because presumably you felt like you had a family, as you said, a purpose around you, and then suddenly you've come out into a completely different life. How was that?
So for me, I never planned on leaving the military. As far as I was concerned, I was what they call a lifer. I was a career man all the way through. So but we're just about to go to Afghanistan on another tour, and I had a parachuting accident. I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quads. So all the support.
Don't tell me the parachute didn't open.
No, this was a freak accident, actually. We were jumping at 15,000 feet. It's called a hey-ho jump, a high altitude, high opening jump. So it's a method of insertion. So unlike skydiving where you're free of lines, the parachute is still attached to the aircraft. So as you exit the aircraft, the parachute will pull out for you. But my leg got caught up in the line on the exit somehow, and I just couldn't. I was frantically trying to kick it out before my leg got torn completely off. Thankfully, it didn't. It pulled my leg up and over my head. But the first issue I had with this was I still had to travel up to 30 minutes in the air to the DZ, but no one else in the team was aware there was a situation. At 15,000 feet, you're on the limits of oxygen, so I'm also drifting in and out of consciousness and vomiting because of the pain. So my first concern was landing it. If I had a bad landing, I could damage the good leg. But it was a great landing. It was a one-legged landing. I was quite impressed. But unfortunately, the damage sustained shortened my career. So I didn't plan on leaving the military. So all I'd ever known was that military lifestyle, you know, as a young boy growing up. I mean, 16 years in the military myself, to then be told, no, thank you for your time. You will now go in this direction, as seeing your friends going off to Afghanistan and you're going that way. So there's a lot of synergies and parallels between professional sports people and special forces. You've spent your career knowing what you're doing, trying to get yourself to the top of your game. You're finally there, and then an injury or retirement, and you're in another direction. So in reflection, I didn't know it at the time, but it's what is called an identity crisis. It's how do I now fit into this society here? You know, I've come from being a tight-knit unit, having a role, having a purpose. Like, we knew what we were doing for the next 10 years. So how do I now fit in society? And I was guilty of it myself, and a lot of guys and girls in the military are probably the same, but I was very quick to blame the civilian community.
Yeah.
I was like, well, they don't understand. They're always late. But that's the civilian community. There's nothing wrong with that. That is just normal. But I then soon realised that we're unique. We need to fit into their will, not them fit into ours. And that's something I picked up on quite quickly. So that, along with my wife being very entrepreneurial, my transition was a lot smoother than maybe some others. You know, in the military, you don't know who provides the council tax or, you know, the heating supply. You don't care. You know, you're just doing the job you love. The military are very good in keeping those distractions away from you. But now all of a sudden you've got to be aware of these, and that's quite daunting.
So how did you then go from obviously being in the military, not just the military, in the special forces, to finding like your value or your purpose or what you wanted to do next in civilian life? So
for me, to add to the pressure when I left, my wife was 8 months pregnant as well. So my initial thought was, how am I going to support my family? Is there any work out there and everything else? So within 48 hours, I was out, people with our skill sets, without sounding like Liam Neeson, the natural progression is the security industry.
Yeah.
And, I used to tell people I was in the security industry, and I think they thought I was a doorman in Club Tropicana, but it's actually quite a diverse industry as well, be it surveillance, close protection, coaching or mentoring. But within 48 hours, I was out in Libya helping set up the DFID project with the British Embassy. It was the Arab Spring, and Gaddafi was now in Tripoli. The city was cornered off. So all the oil and gas media, NGOs were all forming up in Benghazi. So for me, I was trying to find a niche as well. How am I going to excel in this new industry? But I soon identified that Libyans didn't want Libya being another Afghanistan and Iraq. They wanted to take control of the country themselves, but also that these large security companies were charging six-figure sums for crisis management and evacuation plans. And when I started scraping the surface, there was nothing in place. So I flew home. My wife gave birth to our daughter Molly, and then I flew back into the country and I bought 30 weapons on the black market, and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt, and just spent a month on my own in the desert, just designing my own.
You didn't have a team. You literally buried these weapons in the desert.
Yeah, with myself, and I have a local fixer who sort of assisted with certain things, but it was just myself in the desert at night, and then I'd lay up in the daytime and then go out in evenings, and I would just have them strategically placed across the country, along with comms kits and some money, and I just designed my own evacuation plans, and I then sold them to the oil and gas sector and a few other companies, and hopefully never needing to use them. So that was my sort of niche. And in 2012, when the American ambassador got killed in Benghazi, I was there that evening, and I evacuated a German oil company from Benghazi back to Tripoli, which was a success. And then 2014, I was covering the World Cup in Brazil, and I got a phone call. It's now the Tripoli War, which is a civil war ongoing now still actually between the government and the militias. And the Canadian embassy was stuck in Tripoli. So I came back in and I single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy, 18 military and 4 diplomats from Libya to Tunis. But the great thing about that is I never needed any of my weapons. It was actually the success of that was understanding the demographics and the politics, the tribal influences in the countries. And that's one thing I picked up in the special forces. Everyone has this perception of kicking in doors and blowing down buildings and things like that, which is which is 25% of what we do, and we're very good at that. But that's the last resort. 50% of what we do is understanding. It's called support and influence. It's hearts and minds, understanding the actual situation on the ground and not being steered by what you're seeing on TV. And that's that was the success of that. And that's how I then became the top of the pile within the security industry.
That's a really interesting point. So basically, you were saying it was partly physical, obviously, but a lot of it was your mindset going into that situation, presumably remaining calm and sussing the situation out. But how did you take it further? Because presumably you needed authority, confidence, or something behind you to win that situation over.
Yeah.
What makes one man or woman, I'm referring to man or woman, be able to command that authority over another? Because that goes to other things in life as well, obviously. Yeah,
I don't think it was commanding authority. I think it was mutual respect. It's actually, a lot of it was all about communication. You know, the week before I took the Canadian embassy out, the British embassy got shot at every checkpoint that we would be going through, which obviously spooked the Canadians. So I went out, and again, the success of this is also having the right fixers, having the right person in the right place. And Libya's got 164 tribes. So my fixer in Tripoli isn't the fixer I would use in Benghazi. And again, it's identifying the right people. But it was just going to the tribal elders, letting them know what our intentions were, and just being transparent with them. And that's all they wanted. They wanted a bit of respect. And I think that's what it is. And I think that's where the success of that. And, you know, when I worked in Yemen and Somalia, again, I work on my own. I go in on my own. But you gain the respect of the locals and those you're chatting to, because you've you've taken that risk. You're out there. You're identifying the atmospherics. You know, they'll get emails every day from security companies in London and New York offering all the similar services. But the fact that you've taken a risk yourself spoke volumes to them. You know, a white man on his own walking around Somalia isn't the norm.
And you're going to meet them face to face, like you say, rather than on some email or phone or whatever. You're actually there in person. It reminds me of my old sales days and never wanting to do anything on the phone, but actually wanting to be in front of somebody. And I think that rings so true to today, but unfortunately we can't be there face to face today.
No, true, no, very true. But I think again, the world of media as well, you know, paints a picture of these communities, and that's one thing I really wanted to get across as well, especially in my book, is that, you know, these communities are tarnished with one brush, but it's only such a small minority that are bad, and actually they're so hospitable and so friendly. I wanted to paint another picture of what it's like in Somalia and Yemen. I remember spearfishing just south of Mogadishu and grabbing lobsters. You know, it's a beautiful place, but what you see on telly or on the internet is a different thing.
It's a completely different thing. So you, after that, you went on, and we've got to mention this, you've actually broken not one world record, but 2 world records in one of the most, what sounds like toughest challenges out there. Tell me a little bit more about that challenge and what motivated you to do it.
So we've talked about the Canadian Embassy. When I came home from that trip, my wife soon highlighted I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. And again, you know, I think it's chapter 16 in the book. It's called Dead or Divorced. It was that almost T-junction in my life. It was the pin drop. I didn't realize it at the time, but I totally disconnected from society. What I thought was normal, evacuating people across borders, burying weapons, wasn't normal. And I was trying to match that adrenaline rush I had, or scratch that itch that I had when I was still in the Special Forces, without coming to terms with the fact that I'd left. So that was a big wake-up call for myself. My wife's a property developer here, and she said, well, look, you don't need to be taking these risks. Come work with me. So I started working with my wife for a month, and you can imagine with my backstory, sat in these architects and planners meetings, and that I wasn't really interested. But this is probably 5 years from being injured out of the military. I neglected my own physical and mental well-being. So my injured leg was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg because of the muscle wastage. So I bought a push bike off Amazon and just cycled to and from the office, and straight away, it's about 8 miles there, 8 miles back, straight away being active again, physically active. I felt being a lot better. I thought, oh, this is, you know, I had a purpose. I had something to do. But my wife could see that glaze in my eyes. She said, right, you need to do something, rather than burying weapons and smuggling people across borders. So it was about a month before my 40th birthday. And I said, well, I've always fancied doing a world record. And she said, well, what in? And I said, well, cycling doesn't seem to be hurting my knee. Why not cycling? So I was thinking maybe Aberdeen to Dundee, but my wife then found the world's longest motorable road, which is 14,000 miles from southern point of Argentina to northern Alaska. So because of the curvature of the earth, it's equivalent to cycling from London to Sydney and then 4,000 miles. Nice. So having only cycled 20 miles, I applied for the world record. I thought, yeah, why not? Because for me, I wanted to give, I give it everything. Every project I do, I'll give my, the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. I'll push myself to the limits. But I knew that endurance-wise and mentally that I had it from my time in the military. It's just transferring that into a sport. So Guinness came back and said, yeah, you've been successful on your application. So the first person I called, I'm good friends with, I'm going to massively name drop now, is the Duke of Sussex. So I called him up, and we'd known each other about 13 years. And him and I had done stuff for charities before with the military. And I made him aware of my intentions with this bike ride. And this was 2016. So Heads Together campaign, big mental health campaign, hadn't even been launched at this point. I was aware of mental health in the military, but I wasn't aware how big an issue it was throughout the whole of society. And so I just thought, perfect, be it postnatal depression, young children, teenagers, that's the perfect challenge for this. So that was the birth of the challenge.
Had you suffered, sorry, just going back to the point, had you suffered PTSD from the military? Have you got?
No, I haven't suffered PTSD. I'm very fortunate not to, suffer anything like that, but I had seen it firsthand with some of my friends. In reflection, my own mental health, I think I didn't know it at the time, but getting injured out from the military, that identity crisis, that where do I fit? There was probably a little bit of depression there, because my career had been solely focused on my physical attributes. To then be injured and not be able to do anything, I was off balance, as I like to say.
Yeah.
No, very fortunate I don't have post-traumatic stress, but then having now done this campaign and seeing that it affects everyone, it doesn't discriminate, it was the perfect challenge for me. But I was trying to promote the physical activity helps your mental state. That was my messaging with this challenge, yeah.
And I mean, it must have been quite a grueling challenge, I can guess. There must have been points along the route where you were just like, oh God, I really want to give up. What got you through? How did you mentally keep going? What was the mental stamina like behind it?
Yeah, so with this, I'd never, I'd still had only cycled 20 miles. I trained for a year before we went, I built up my mileage and things like that. But I just took it as a military operation and just crossed out, I just put a military set of orders on there and crossed out ammunition. So from the planning side, I was confident in the plan. On the physical aspect, I thought, I will do this. But what I used to do is I used to trick the mind. So 14,000 miles is a long way. It just consumed me. You wouldn't get on the plane. But it's a bit like Special Forces selection, 6 months long. You only deal with the day that's in front of you. So on day one, you don't look at 6 months later getting your beret and belt. You just look at the CFT. And that's what I did is I broke it into countries, broke the countries into days, and broke the days into 4 stages. So for me, I was just so I'd get in the morning, have breakfast, cycle as fast as I could for 2 hours, and then just have some food and water for 30 minutes. But then I was quite disciplined in my timings as well. It was always like a military operation. I was back on the bike. And all I would then look at is the next 2 hours. I wouldn't look at that afternoon. I wouldn't look at the next day. So for me, I was just doing 4 mini PT sessions a day and not a world record. Before you know it, you've done done a day, you've done a week, you've done a country. And you're also growing confident in your abilities along the way. But also made sure that I hit my objectives for the day. I thought that was quite key for my mental state going to bed that evening. I see people or other people doing challenges that are like 10 miles behind today. I'll catch that up tomorrow. And well, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, and you could have another bad day, be 20 to 30 miles behind. So mentally, you're beating yourself up because you're not where you're supposed to be. So for me, I always made sure I just stay on the bike until I hit the objective. So the next day I was in the right position.
And do you think you can take that into other things in life? I mean, obviously this is a challenge that you're talking about, a grueling challenge. But what you just talked about there is quite similar to goal setting, I guess, and how you set your achievements or visions for the future, rather than just look at this big vision. It's how you chunk it down.
Yeah. Well, like corporates, they'll have their targets for the end of the year, financial year, and it'll just look like, oh my God, that's unachievable. But it's just chipping away and breaking that down so that you and the team can deal with it mentally. But it's a bit like, and then with the other analogy, it's a bit like sales. You just stay in the office, make those extra 3 or 4 calls. Don't go home early. Just stay there until the job's done. And then, those extra 3 or 4 calls may be the difference between, the end result as well.
What was the end result for you? Because obviously you've got 2 world records, but was there anything else that you were focused on? I believe you were coming back for a special wedding.
Yeah, well, that wasn't really the plan. So the world record was 117 days. I was aiming for 110, and it wasn't because I wanted to smash it by a week. It's because when I'd done the planning, I looked at every potential scenario that could happen, and I had a contingency plan and a tertiary plan. But there were situations that were out of my control, natural disasters, coups in countries, everything else. So I thought, well, I'll have a week's fudge. So should there be any issues, it eats into that time and not the world record. So I think the worst position I was in by the end of the first week was 39 miles behind target because I had strong winds. But my target was still a week ahead of the world record. So I was always in a good position. I then, the winds then changed to my advantage. I took 10 days off the South America world record. It wasn't without issues. I had food poisoning twice in Peru. I crashed the bike in Chile, got knocked off my bike in Colombia. But it wasn't something that was, ruined the challenge completely. I then got to North America on day 70. and I'm 40 days ahead of the world record. So I thought, perfect, you know, I can take a couple of days rest if need be. We are where we should be. And then my wife rang me and said we've been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding, which just changed the dynamics.
Just that little wedding, just that little wedding down the road.
It was obviously great to be invited, but
Yeah.
going into that phone call, I was 14 days ahead of the world record. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind. For me to get back for the wedding, I had to be finished by day 102. So all my efforts from the first 2.5 months had just gone. And then the next day I had 60-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes in Texas. So I was now 2 days behind. So I just, I just changed the plan of the project. There's an app on your phone called Windy TV. It gives you the strength and directions of the winds forecasted every hour for the next 2 weeks. So that 24-hour period, I made a plan, and to get out of Lubbock, I had to cycle 340 miles in the next 36 hours. And I just played chess with Mother Nature with the app, finding gaps in the winds and using it to my advantage as well. And the luxury we had in North America and Canada is a lot safer security-wise, so I could cycle at night. So I had 17 days planned for North America, and I cycled in 11.5 days. So I gained that time to then be ahead of where I should be. So I was a week outside, and I was like, perfect. You know, the world record's secure unless I get eaten by a bear, and I'll be back in time for this wedding. I then got a phone call about a professional cyclist. So I still class myself as a novice. You know, my sponsorship marketing team did a SWOT analysis, and we did the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats. And the only weakness that came back at the beginning of the challenge was my arrogance towards the cycling community, which I took as a strength. And no one's ever said that in the cycling community. But I got a week outside, and this professional cyclist who, Michael, he already has 3 other endurance world records. He's sponsored by Red Bull, he's the Austrian triathlon team. He'd come out on social media and said he was going to cycle the Pan American Highway in August and be the first man in history to do it under 100 days. So that then changed the dynamics for me again. So I cycled for 22 hours in the last 30 hours in -18 to make sure that I came in under the 100 days. So it wasn't the original plan. But fortunately for me, when the information came to me, I could act on it. You know, if I'd known about Michael and the wedding from day one, it may have been too much to deal with. But so it wasn't the original plan. And I sort of contradict myself. I say the success of this challenge was the planning, but actually the success of this was being able to react to the situation on the ground as it changed.
And I guess that goes for a lot of things as well. Things change in life, and you've got to be able to be flexible.
Yeah.
But also,
you have your start point and you have your objective. That's always the same. It's just how the route there isn't always as straight.
And you mentioned planning a couple of times, and obviously that's a big part of it. How did you, or what was the planning involved, and how important is that? Presumably that's made part of a lot of your sort of career in the special forces as well. Planning must be a huge part of going into a mission.
Yeah, planning is a huge part going into the mission. We have sort of templates that we use, and you always we call them actions on. You always look at the potentials. What if this? What if this? What's the plan? What is that? You always have secondary and tertiary plans. But we always say, yeah, the best plan in the world doesn't survive first contact. You know, no one expected to shoot back at us. I think it's good to have a plan in place, but also to be mindful of the fact that it never goes to plan. And I think that's where we're quite good, especially the special forces. We're very much, I refer to the Green Army and the special forces. We're very much different. The Green Army, they know what they're doing, where they've got to be, what time, what they're wearing. Whereas we're almost a different mindset. We get dropped into a place. There is no infrastructure. You've got to make it happen. And that's what I love. I love a challenge like that, is to make things happen. Going into Somalia on my own, setting up companies, I like a little challenge. So planning is good. Planning is good. It's always good to have a plan, but don't be upset if it doesn't go to plan. Just react to the situation. Things like COVID. No one can anticipate at the beginning of the year we've been in this situation, but you adapt to the situation, you get creative, and you just keep moving forward.
What do you actually do to relax? Is that part of your ethos? Do you relax, or do you get stressed about anything?
I do try and relax. My time is with my family. I've never spent as much time as I have during this period ever with my family. So that's been quite good. But for me, I like to have something to look forward to. I like to have a challenge, and my next challenge is to kayak the River Nile. I know that's probably not going to happen this year, but I've set myself mini challenges as well. So I like to be physically active. I think that's really key, especially in this period now. Is stay active. Yes, you can't do huge challenges, but just keep yourself ticking over. So for me, this is the perfect time for me to do the planning rather than the physical. So I'm getting a lot of planning in.
So can you reveal any of the next challenges that's coming next?
Yeah, so my USP is, I unlike other adventures and challenges, I take a sport or discipline I've never done before and find the biggest challenge. So I've been quite arrogant to the cycling community. I've enjoyed cycling the world's longest road. The plan now is to kayak the world's longest river, which has never been done before, from source to sea. So from the source in Rwanda to the Mediterranean Sea, which is 4,280 miles. But unlike the last challenge, I spoke to the previous record holders, and that was good because you can get a lot of information you needed. And I think one thing I was proud of with the last challenge is I spoke to them all, and they all went from north to south, but all their issues were in South and Central America. So I turned it on its head. I just turned it around. But with this new one, we've got no one really. There's people that have done the stages, but no one's done it from start to end. But I love the fact that I talked about earlier about these nations are so hospitable that actually I'm putting all my responsibility into their hands and let them get me through it.
So tell me about your book, because
yes.
When did you write the book? It's called Relentless. I can see it behind you.
Yeah, nice little plug. Yeah, so Relentless. Well, to be honest, when I came back from the bike ride, I didn't see it as a career in guest speaking or doing a book or even other challenges. I did it, so I wasn't, running around the desert with weapons and smuggling people. So we weren't really in a position as another career. But I got introduced to the Blair Partnership. So they own Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, and Neil Blair's a lovely guy. I sat down with him, told him my story as I've told you. And he said, yeah, this needs to be a book. At the moment, there's a lot of books out there. I call them biceps and bullets. There's a lot of books out there because people on TV.
I love it. Biceps and bullets.
Because they're on TV and people like to hear the stories of the special forces. But actually, you can't talk about the special forces in your books. But what's great about this book is there's all the other stories, the private security stories. And I've only touched on some of the amazing stories that I did there. And that's where the great thing about the book is that I can share those stories, and it actually flows. The first third is about my childhood and the military. The middle third is the private security, and then the last third is the bike ride, and it's all those experiences and lessons learned from the first two thirds that have just been transferred into a new discipline.
Tell me what the biggest lessons learned are, if you look at what you've been through all those different phases of your life. Is there any one thing that really sticks out, or maybe a couple of things that stick out for you?
Lessons learned is, I'm very trusting. I'm probably too trusting, my wife says. So one is not put everything out there. I'm very, we work well together, me and my wife. We know our strengths and weaknesses. I'm the door opener, I'm the sociable one. But when it comes to contracts and money, my wife deals with that. So that's one. I've been burnt a couple of times in trusting people. But that's probably my own lesson to myself. But one I normally tell people is anticipation is worse than participation. A lot of people overthink things and things like that. Just don't overthink it. Just do it, and then in reflection you'll be like, it actually wasn't that bad.
I like that. Don't overthink it, because it can lead to procrastination as well, and you're never actually doing anything about it.
It is as well. I think if I was to tell someone on the street, right, you're going to run the London Marathon in 2 months, they'll tell me all the reasons why they can't do it, whereas I will tell you all the reasons why you can. So it's almost blocking off those exits.
Do you have any advice out there if someone was watching this and they wanted to do some sort of challenge? It could be any challenge in life. What advice would you give them to either get started or to help them along their journey?
What I say is, you have your objective, write your objective down, but don't worry about the target yet. Break it down into manageable bite sizes. Because I'll always use the marathon as an example. 26 miles. People will try and run that straight away and won't achieve it. So they're deflated, they're defeated as well. So you need to break it down into, start at the beginning, start with 4 miles. Achieve that, and then start growing with confidence, start learning about the sport or discipline that you're doing. I didn't know anything about cycling. I did Land's End John O'Groats 3 weeks after cycling, and everyone said to me that you're not bike fit yet. And I thought it was fitness. It actually wanted to measurements to your bikes. So I learned a lot from that, and then realized actually I needed some expert help. So yeah, don't be scared to ask for people for help who know more about it. I try and carve, mentally will only get you so far. You need help with that, but break it down into manageable bite sizes. Don't overthink it.
Dean, it's been fantastic speaking to you. And before I come on to my last question, where can people find out more about you? Obviously, you've got your book out.
Yes.
Anywhere else that people can, if they want to talk to you or get you on stage, for example? Well, maybe not right now, get you physically on stage.
Well, I'm obviously on all the social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook, Dean Stott. Back on Twitter now at Dean Stott SBS. I think I've got that right. And my website is www.deanstott.com, so you can get in touch with me on all of them. And the book's on Amazon, Audio and Waterstones at the moment.
Fantastic. We'll put all that on the show notes. And for my final question, Dean, if you were to write a message in a bottle for future generations to find, what would that message be?
Carve your own path. Learn from your mistakes. Don't repeat your mistakes.
Love it. Dean, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. It's been great to have you, and I hope to see you one day in person.
Yeah, we will do. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, there's a new interview out every Monday. So hit subscribe and like, and you'll get it straight into your inbox.